And I was inspired to create this because I love the tools that are already out there. Like John Hendrickson worked on Veggie Compass out of University of Wisconsin. Like there's cool stuff out there. But I was like, how do I help a farmer make this like quick pricing decision? Because they don't have last year's data to look at. They don't have the old labor records to pull. We need like a quick forecasting tool that people can use in a pinch. This is not meant to be like a comprehensive cover everything on the farm kind of tool. This is like, I am in a decision-making space and I got to get it down on paper. Like that farmer from Farm 1, if they were going to go then wholesale that specialty crop, they got to figure out, like, are they going to lose more money on the price they're offering? Because they haven't really been doing it that way and they have enough knowledge to know approximately how to put it together. This doesn't work great for someone who's never farmed because they don't know how long it takes them to weed a row, right? But farmers who work on their land have a pretty good gut check on this, and if they don't work on their land, they need to sit down with their crew leader. Okay, so we're in an abbreviated version, but go through price versus cost by product, which is the model. We'll talk about a margins example, and then the costing templates and some key considerations. Okay, so first of all, about the approach, right? The farm finances are obviously complicated. We've talked about numbers of ways to journey down that road. After the cost of good, we've got this pile of other expenses, right? The indirect costs. So we want to start with a forecast and work backwards. When we're trying to figure out, can we bear this situation, but we don't have all the information, we want to kind of start at the end and back out. That generally seems to work best. All right, so just a note about wholesale. I mean, you've already got this, right? Some people are like, why would I wholesale? It's actually less money per item, but you diversify, so you reduce your risk. If you're already doing direct to consumer, you're diversifying. If you're really good at producing just a couple things really efficiently, you can hone in there. You can justify an equipment purchase for a particular opportunity at volume. And it's a good strategy for land. Like, let's say you're already doing okay, but you have land you want to start building up on, and it's a lot to build up those direct to consumer markets. You might be able to like find a couple of good wholesale customers. And if you're already traveling, you may be passing by some really good potential customers. All right, but starting up for farmers that don't already wholesale, I think starting up a wholesale enterprise without understanding your product cost is really dangerous, because at that lower price point, you could be unknowingly losing money, reducing your profit, and not be aware of it because you haven't done your homework. That whole vanity, like sell more stuff, doesn't always work out. We got to look at profit. So we went through some of this already, right? We're getting down to gross margin. And the thought is, what should my margin goal be? And does that differ by sales channel, and for what reason? Well, yeah, it differs by sales channel. Like if I'm going direct to consumer and I'm going to the farmer's market, and I have to pay somebody or two somebodies to stand there all day, and it's like a 10-hour day between like loading in and going and loading out, that's definitely different, right? The labor application specifically to that channel is going to be different. If I'm going wholesale and I'm packing like X amount of units in a wax box versus like everything in a beautiful little clamshell or a little pint, and like, you know, getting my branding on it versus not, obviously there's a difference in direct cost there too. Sure, we could think of a ton of other examples. Okay, so here's an example, right? If we set a wholesale margin goal, this is not the margin goal I would recommend even thinking about for direct to consumer, 20 to 25%, then what that would mean, right? If we know our gross margin goal for this thing is 25%, then that means that all of other expenses need to equal less than that percent to produce a profit, right? So if our margin goal is 25%, then that means that if we have like a 75% cost of goods sold going at a wholesale price or a farm to school price or something, then that 25% of all of our products combined needs to cover all the rest of the expenses of the farm and our pay, right? And then have some cushion to produce a profit. We all know that like there's initial time to get wholesale accounts started, but overall cost of sales and marketing are generally much less. Retail margins need to be higher, right? We talked about that already. Here's just like a quick walkthrough margins example. Something like this I think is helpful if you're trying to get the point across about margins with a farmer that you're working at. But obviously in one case, she sells the potatoes at $2 a pound at the farmer's market. Her wholesale price is $25 for a 50-pound bag. That price difference is $2 versus 50 cents per pound. She's to drive a high enough margin to make a profit. So unless her cost is less than 40 cents per pound, she doesn't meet her margin goal, right? If we have that margin goal of 20%, right? Because if we have a 40-cent cost of goods and a 50-cent sale price and the margin is 10 cents, that's going to be a 20% goal, right? So we're just trying to illustrate that difference. Okay, so why are we going to use this tool? To understand gross profit and the impact of pricing on that. We want to understand which parts of the enterprise are the biggest impact on cost, right? And this tool helps you kind of see that right in front of your face, and then begin a conversation about what we might be able to tweak if we want to change the price we can accept, right? Do we have a different way of approaching that piece of equipment, whatever. Basically, you know, when you reach out to a buyer, you start working with buyers, maybe because you said your markets aren't super developed here, maybe you have a little bit more window of opportunity and leeway to like get it right. But, you know, in California, like if you talk to the buyer and you don't know what price you can bear and you send them on a wild goose chase, you're probably just gonna move on to the next. Oh, I don't know, let me check on that and figure it out and I'll call you back in 2 weeks, and then, you know. So the idea is to start with a sales projection for the new enterprise or the new product, and then make sure it generates a profit. And so I'll just show you the spreadsheet. I'm going to skip those because we're just going to talk about produce today. So we want to start with a sales projection, understand ballpark yield and cost. If you do have time tracking records, you can get pretty accurate. Otherwise, you're just kind of having a gut check with the farmer. And having financials in order makes it a lot easier to know what to set as that margin goal, right? Like, is that 25% margin gonna cover what you need it to cover in your business? So like, let's say you're like, oh, I have like another quarter acre, I'm gonna wholesale farm. I'm gonna farm this for like a wholesale market with one particular crop and get X amount of rotations a year or whatever, 2 or 3 crops. And you're operating a little bit of a deficit, and the reason you're doing this quarter acre expansion is to like cover that deficit. So you would know, like, let's say you need to make another $15,000 for your farm to balance out. You want the margin on that to be $15,000. Like, are you going to meet that doing that, or should you think about an alternate plan, right? So that's kind of how we're framing this. So the critical point is that farmers usually chase sales, right? So we want to make sure they're making money on what they're selling. At the smaller scale, it's a trade-off of time. Can we afford to do something or not? And if we're going to use the time for that, we don't have it for something else. So time becomes the opportunity cost. And so the biggest learning opportunities running through this with people is profit over volume. And that the lessons on price and margins are so applicable to value-added products too. Sometimes processing's a mistake. Like I worked on an urban farm for a number of years. And when I started there, we were like processing everything that was like left at the end of the farmer's market day. Like we were sourcing from outside the farm and growing in a couple high tunnels. It was a small urban farm environment. And like the executive director was like, everything has to be used. We will not donate or throw away. If we're going to throw away, we will donate, but we're going to use it. We're going to send it to the commercial. We had a little commercial kitchen and we're going to use it. And I started like calculating some of the labor going into those products, and it just really wasn't worth it. And we had this like thing that we did every year for the winter CSA where we would buy flats of strawberries and we would process them in our kitchen, and we would make strawberry jam. We'd make like 800 jars of strawberry jam so that we could drop it in the winter CSA twice, and like a kitchen with like regular pots, you know what I mean? So we're like water bath processing like 800 cans of strawberry jam. And like, it was really beautiful in the middle of winter in Pennsylvania to crack open a jar of like summer strawberry jam, and our customers loved it. But man, we were losing a ton of money on that jam. Even just like at the value we put it in the CSA at $5 a small jar, we're still losing money on it. And it's like part of a calculated CSA spreadsheet. And, you know, I was like, why are we doing this? Why do we have to do it? Like there's a processing place like an hour from here. They could run it all in a day. I can send one employee up there to drop it, one employee up there to pick it up. It's like 4 hours of time total. Like when you do the whole math that way, we could still give that beautiful burst of summer, but in a way that was far more affordable. And so we ended up doing it that way, and we dropped a couple of our value-added products too, because there's just no way to do it. So something to think about. So yeah, let's demo this thing. So I'm gonna walk through one sample of this in 2 different ways because I want to make sure we have time for the opportunity assessment model too. There's other tabs in here, so when you see it, you'll be able to like look at a different crop example. But let's start with this pounds of carrots example, and then I'll go through it like in the slides bit by bit. But again, like the chef in the cooking show, I think you need to see it before I break it up. So the farmer inputs like their crop, And then it's all based on this bed feet and rows per bed. Rows per bed is just really a reminder of how many rows you planted so you can duplicate it. But like, it's all based on that bed length, and farmers have different bed lengths. We looked at doing it in acres or whatever, but this seems to be the way that could be most universally used. And then, you know, you consult your records or what have you and enter a margin for this product. And we recommend a minimum margin goal of at least 20% for wholesale or 40% for retail, but I think you can get more in a lot of cases. Again, guidelines like make your own grounded assumptions, please. I don't want to be responsible for somebody thinking they can achieve this. But so in this particular case, this farmer was growing 400 pounds of carrots per bed at a wholesale price of 60 cents a pound. And so that's the sale and that's the margin goal. Yeah, it's a place where you can get your hands on a lot of carrots wholesale. So you enter the number of beds that you want to plant for the crop, and all you do is enter the beds here. And then it calculates based on this your projected revenues. Then it calculates your projected profits based on the percent, and then the expenses is a subtraction, right? It's what's left. So this is your budget. Remember, this is a budgeting tool. It's not an actual like records tool. So then it spits out with how many beds, and you can change this in the model to see how it reflects. I gotta apologize because this is a little old as far as I didn't update the field labor, but I don't know if you can still get field labor at that price. In Pennsylvania, you actually can. But I don't know if I told you guys that either. I'm from Pennsylvania, and I spent my first like couple of years doing this farm consulting there and then moved out to California. So very different marketplace. So and then you can put in a factor as a percent for taxes and fringe benefits to get an effective cost of labor.
So low.
And so I know it's much higher where I live now. And I mean, it's hard to find labor at that price anymore, even though Pennsylvania's minimum wage is just about to change though. So you enter your cost of direct inputs per bed, right? Seeds or, you know, compost or whatever you're going to put on there. And then it spits you out a labor budget, right? Because you already had a budget of expenses that you determined above. And then per bed, it's going to be $38. And then base what you had left to reach that 20% margin. It gives you a labor budget and then tells you how many hours that is based on your effective cost of labor. Then you start to plan your bed. And I think in different regions, these bed activities are going to be real different. But for, you know, these activities here that we listed out, like bed prep, seeding, transplanting, thinning, cultivating, hand weeding, etc., they're not all utilized. It's the number of passes down the bed per crop in the time from preparation to harvest. And then how many minutes does it take to do that pass? And so you could adjust this for like a slacker crew or like a really efficient crew. But the idea is this is a pretty rough estimate. You asked earlier about accounting for the fact that like everything goes over budget. You mentioned that earlier in the day. And my business partner has a term for that he calls ghost dollars. They're like the dollars that go out the door when your crew goes to the bathroom, or the dollars that go out the door when two people in your crew decide they're gonna have an argument for 15 minutes and not harvest anything. So, you know, you're probably setting up an ideal model, but if you want to throw ghost dollars in line 70 and put in a number, like you could put in an extra 20 minutes for BS if that's how your crew works. If it's just you and your brother or sister and you guys are killing it, then just like whatever, put it in there. So you get a total time in minutes, and then that gives you a number of hours. And then it gives you a little bit of analysis where, again, you can put in the number of beds in the crop plan. It doesn't have to match the top. So you had a total projected yield, income, direct cost, labor, margin, cost per unit versus your margin goal. And then you can make a decision. Where I think this gets kind of cool is that there's a little opportunity assessment scenario at the bottom. We're going to go into a broader opportunity assessment model quickly after this. But basically, you know, there's a scenario here where they say like, okay, if you go up here and you look at this, where is it? Washing, packing, 2 hours. Harvest to wash shed, 2 hours. So is there anything that I can do to reduce that time? That's like the biggest piece of expense in here.
You gave it away already.
Oh, because I showed you.
Down,
Yeah, so
we need one too.
the root washer. So the way that we built this model is farmers growing a lot of stuff. So basically we were saying we want to finance the root washer because we're really strapped for cash. It's not that much money, but we're kind of strapped for cash right now. And the situation is that, we're going to share it across a bunch of different crops. We're going to do the beets and we're going to do the whatever in there. So a percentage of that gets allocated to the carrot piece here based on your harvest volume or however you want to do it. So we look at the opportunity assessment, the payment, and then how does that impact like the cost and the margin, looking at that, and then how does that make you think? So like, okay, I'm going to pay this off for however long I'm going to pay it off, and I'm not really going to make any margin on it while I'm paying it off. But then what happens to the situation up here of my cost per unit of 33 cents a pound, and then let's say I go in here and I make this 40 minutes. What does that do? I don't think it changed it. Hang on. So we went from a 44% margin, and then we changed it time down. We go up to a 52% margin, right? So you can see the difference if you change the input. So there's a couple different ways to play with it that you could incorporate what would happen if you made an investment in a piece of equipment. I have like a broader opportunity assessment model for adding new enterprises that we're going to talk about in a second. But it's pretty simple, but it gives people a pretty quick way to fill it out based on their understanding of their business. And then there's like another one for growing transplants if you use a high tunnel or some other like high value piece of your property and you have specific labor in there because you're growing a lot of transplants for the season. I will go back to the presentation and kind of break it down quickly and then go on to the last piece. I think we went through this pretty well. But basically, it's really all dependent on the margin goal as far as what comes out for your labor budget and your expenses, right? If you set the margin goal to be much higher, then it's going to give you a lower budget for expenses, right? Because you're trying to make more money out of the bottom. So it's relative to that initial goal. Just a couple points of note, the number of passes per crop is like the whole lifespan of the crop. The time in minutes is the best estimate. And you have to use a number of 1 or greater passes to calculate. So I know that like washing doesn't go down the row physically, but if you have a 0 in there, you're going to get a 0 calculation. So if it's something that you do one time, you can just put in a 1. It's kind of a way to make it compute and function. This is a sneak peek at the transplant model, but I'm going to let you guys take a look at that on your own. And then the yields come from the price and the yields that you estimated at the top. And so the point is to compare that 47% to your desired margin and see if it's worth the effort. In other cases, it may not look so pretty. And then it also tells you a couple of stats here. So what percent of that budget is direct cost versus labor, right? 30 versus 70%. And then there's just a little bit more information here explaining that, over 2 years, 25% of that is assigned to carrots. So it's going to potentially bring down the margins on a couple other crops too. And you're going to have to look at the big picture and determine if it makes sense to take the hit for a period of time so that you can be more efficient and make more money later on. And you have to go back up and adjust the labor for something that impacts the labor. Just showing that you go back and reduce the time. And then what happens if I have 15 beds in the crop plan instead of 5? With the root washer, I can still bring my margin back up to 33% because I'm spreading that expense over a lot more root vegetables. But you need more land to be able to do that. So I know I went through that kind of quickly, but the whole point is to have a forecasting tool where you don't have to have years of data collection. Gut check on pricing and inputs before you go to plant. And then the biggest opportunities for learning are just getting comfortable with educated guessing and forecasting. I know this makes a lot of people uncomfortable if you don't have the experience. So just like, how do I get in there and just start plugging away and playing with it and figure out how to work it? Yeah, I will say that I was initially hesitant to present this tool here because I know that like Tanya Murray's coming out and doing her crop costing thing, and her Know Your Cost to Grow tool is awesome. But my coworker talked me into doing it because we've had a lot of really good experiences with trainers and farmers being able to use this to answer questions that they have no idea how to answer. The stuff where you look back at the year is so great for planning for next year, but if you just don't know yet, you can make that commitment to begin data collection with a really precise tool while you work this and get going. So it's nice to be able to have something quick in your back pocket if you need it.